Have you ever heard of a small-town boy whose life changed overnight? At first glance, Michael was just an ordinary 12-year-old boy, living in a peaceful, quiet town in the United States. He spent his days going to school, playing with his younger sister, and helping his parents with household chores. His family wasn't wealthy, but they made do with what they had. Like many others in their community, they faced struggles, rising prices, growing tensions among neighbors, and an uncertain future. Yet, through it all, they found comfort in their faith. Every night, no matter how difficult the day had been, they would gather as a family to pray, believing that God was watching over them. But on one cold winter evening, everything changed. It started like any other night. The wind howled through the trees as the town prepared to sleep. Michael finished his dinner, helped clean the table, and sat by the window, staring at the falling snow outside. The streets were empty, the world outside eerily quiet. Yet, something felt different. A strange unease filled the air, though he couldn't explain why. Then, it happened. A sudden flash of light, so bright that it turned night into day, illuminated the sky. A deep, vibrating hum echoed through the town, shaking the very ground beneath Michael's feet. He ran to the window, his heart pounding. Outside, the sky swirled with colors he had never seen before, shades of gold, violet, and an electric blue that pulsed like a living thing. Michael's breath caught in his throat. His instincts told him to run, to call for his parents, but he couldn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the light as if it was calling to him, drawing him in. And then, in an instant, the light surged toward him, enveloping his entire body. Everything went dark. When Michael opened his eyes, he was no longer in his room. The world around him had changed, and so had he. What happened that night? Where did Michael go? And most importantly, how would this mysterious event alter his life forever? Stay with us as we uncover the incredible truth behind this life-changing moment. The warm glow of the dining room light flickered softly as Michael and his family sat around the dinner table, sharing a meal like they did every night. Laughter filled the air as his younger sister recounted a funny story from school, and his parents exchanged knowing smiles. It was an ordinary evening, peaceful, comforting, and familiar. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Michael's fork clattered onto his plate. His body tensed, his eyes widened for a brief second as if he had seen something invisible to the rest of them. And then, he collapsed. His chair toppled over with a thud, his body motionless on the floor. His father was the first to react. Panic gripped him as he rushed to Michael's side, shaking his son, calling his name over and over again. But there was no response. His mother, her face drained of color, grabbed the phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. Meanwhile, his younger sister, too afraid to move, pressed her hands together, whispering prayers she had learned in Sunday school. Minutes felt like hours. The wail of sirens pierced through the cold night air as paramedics burst through the front door. Their faces were set with urgency as they assessed the situation, moving with practiced precision. They checked his pulse, nothing. His breathing, gone. Without wasting a second, they started CPR, pressing down on his chest, forcing air into his lungs, desperately trying to bring him back. But for nearly 10 minutes, Michael was clinically dead. During those moments, time stood still for his family. His father knelt beside him, tears streaming down his face. His mother, clutching her daughter in her arms, could do nothing but sob and pray. The paramedics didn't give up, their voices sharp and focused as they worked against the clock. Then, just when hope seemed to fade, it happened. Michael gasped. His body jerked violently as he took in a breath. His eyes shot open, wide and glassy, as if he had been pulled from the depths of another world. The paramedics exchanged looks of disbelief. His father's hands trembled as he reached for his son's face. His mother let out a strangled cry of relief. But Michael was different. He sat up slowly, his gaze distant, his expression filled not with fear, but with an eerie calmness. As if he had just returned from somewhere beyond human understanding. He blinked, looking at each of them before finally whispering 4 chilling words. "I saw something beautiful." Silence filled the room. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. What had Michael seen in those 10 minutes? Where had he been? And how would this experience change not just his life, but the lives of countless others? Stay with us as we uncover the extraordinary truth behind this life-altering event. The moment Michael collapsed, his world changed. At first, there was only darkness, an eerie stillness, as if time itself had come to a halt. But then, something shifted. A strange sensation washed over him, unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if he had been freed from the constraints of his body, weightless, unbound by the physical world. He looked down and saw himself lying motionless on the floor. His father was shaking him frantically, his mother's face was soaked with tears, and his younger sister clutched a small cross in her trembling hands, whispering desperate prayers. The paramedics worked with urgency, their voices sharp, their movements precise. Yet, from where he was floating, none of it felt real. There was no pain, no fear, only an overwhelming sense of calm, as if he had been gently separated from all earthly worries. Then, it happened. A force, gentle but undeniable, began pulling him upward. At first, he resisted, instinctively trying to grasp onto the familiar world below. But the pull was too strong, and within moments, he was soaring through a vast tunnel of light. The tunnel shimmered with warmth and radiance, colors beyond human comprehension dancing around him like living energy. It was beautiful, more beautiful than anything he had ever seen on earth. Soft whispers echoed in the air around him. At first, they were barely audible, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, they grew clearer, forming words, not frightening, but soothing, comforting, as if they had always been there, waiting for him to listen. "You are not alone. You have a purpose. It is not your time yet." Michael felt an immense presence surrounding him, powerful, yet full of love. He couldn't see where the voices were coming from, but he felt them deep within his soul. They carried knowledge, wisdom, a sense of something far greater than himself. It wasn't just words, it was truth, pure and undeniable. As he moved further into the tunnel, a sense of understanding filled him. He wasn't just passing through, he was being shown something. Then, in the distance, he saw figures, silhouettes bathed in light, standing at the threshold of something vast and infinite. He felt drawn toward them, yet he knew, he wasn't meant to go any further. One figure stepped forward, radiating a presence so familiar, yet unexplainable. A voice, gentle, yet filled with authority, spoke directly to him. "Michael, you must go back." He wanted to stay. The peace, the love, the overwhelming warmth, everything in him longed to remain in this place. But the voice was firm, leaving no room for question. "You have a mission, a purpose yet to be fulfilled." And just like that, he felt himself being pulled backward, faster and faster, the light around him fading into darkness. The whispers grew distant, the warmth began to fade, and suddenly, he gasped, his lungs filling with air, his eyes snapping open. He was back. Back in his body. Back in the world he had left behind. But nothing would ever be the same again. What had he seen? Who were the voices? And what was the mission he had been sent back to fulfill? Stay with us as we unravel the mysteries of Michael's extraordinary journey beyond the physical realm. As Michael emerged from the tunnel, he found himself in a place beyond anything his mind could comprehend. The air itself shimmered with an ethereal glow, and the sky was not like the one he had known on earth, it stretched infinitely, bathed in a golden radiance that seemed to pulse with life. Beneath his feet, clouds of pure gold drifted effortlessly, soft yet solid enough to stand on. A warm, gentle breeze carried the faintest sound of music, melodies so beautiful, so otherworldly, that they resonated deep within his soul. He had never felt such peace, such love, such overwhelming joy. He knew, without question, that this was home. Then, in the distance, a figure appeared. At first, Michael could not make out any details. The light surrounding the figure was too bright, too pure. But as the figure came closer, something stirred deep within him. His heart began to race, yet not out of fear. It was a recognition, a knowing beyond words. And then he saw him. Jesus. Dressed in flowing white robes, radiating a brilliance that was both blinding and comforting, Jesus exuded an overwhelming presence of power, peace, and love. His eyes, filled with wisdom and compassion, met Michael's, and in that moment, every fear, every doubt, every earthly worry melted away. Michael fell to his knees, overcome by the sheer holiness before him. But Jesus, with a gentle smile, reached out his hand and placed it on Michael's shoulder. The touch sent waves of warmth through him, not just physically, but deep into his spirit, like a fire, but not one that burned. Instead, it filled him with a sense of purpose, of understanding. Then Jesus spoke, his voice resonating through the very air around them, filled with both authority and unimaginable love. You are here because you have been chosen to carry an important message. Michael's mind raced. A message? Chosen? He didn't understand. But before he could ask, Jesus continued. What you have seen, what you will remember, is not just for you. You must return and tell the world what awaits those who believe, what awaits those who seek the truth. Many have forgotten, many have strayed, and many have lost hope. But you will remind them. Michael felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know how, he was just a boy. How could he carry such a responsibility? As if reading his thoughts, Jesus knelt before him, looking into his eyes with infinite patience. You will not be alone. My Spirit will guide you. You will know what to say, and when the time comes, hearts will be touched. But for now, you must go back. Your time here is not yet finished. Michael's heart ached at the thought of leaving this place. He wanted to stay, to remain in this perfect, eternal presence. But deep down, he knew what Jesus was telling him was true. There was something he needed to do, a mission he had to fulfill. As if sensing his struggle, Jesus placed his other hand over Michael's heart. Do not be afraid. What you have seen is real. What you have felt is true. And one day, you will return. But not yet. With those words, everything around him began to blur. The golden light faded, the warmth slowly withdrew, and before he could say another word, Michael felt himself being pulled backward, back to earth, back to his body, back to the world that had once been his only reality. Then, with a sharp gasp, he woke up. His journey to heaven had ended, but his mission on earth had just begun. What was the message Jesus wanted him to share? How would this experience change Michael's life forever? Stay with us as we continue this extraordinary story. Michael stood frozen as the visions unfolded before his eyes. The earth stretched out beneath him, vast oceans, towering mountains, endless forests, and cities bustling with life. It was the world he knew, yet something was terribly wrong. The skies darkened. A heavy shadow loomed over the land, and in an instant, chaos erupted. Flames devoured entire cities, smoke rising like an ominous signal of despair. The earth cracked, swallowing homes and streets. Floodwaters surged through towns, washing away everything in their path. The wind howled with terrifying force as hurricanes shredded through neighborhoods, leaving only ruins behind. But it wasn't just nature that raged. Michael saw people turning on one another. Not just with weapons, but with hatred, division, and cold indifference. Families shattered, friendships broken, nations at war, not just over land or power, but over fear, pride, and anger. He could hear the cries of children, the desperate pleas for help, and the eerie silence of those who had lost all hope. Tears welled up in his eyes. His heart ached at the suffering before him. Why are you showing me this? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Beside him, Jesus stood firm, his expression solemn yet filled with deep compassion. "These are visions of a world that has forgotten love, faith, and unity," Jesus replied. "But there is still time. Humanity can still change." Michael's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The visions continued, images of greed, corruption, people abandoning their faith, choosing selfishness over kindness, power over humility. He saw leaders deceiving those who trusted them, families torn apart by anger, and hearts growing colder with each passing day. Then, Jesus spoke again, his voice steady and filled with sorrow. "The greatest danger is not from the storms or the fires," he said. "It is from the hearts that have turned away from love." Michael's body trembled. The weight of those words was heavier than anything he had ever felt. He understood now, this was not just a vision of destruction, but a warning. A call to wake up before it was too late. But then, something changed. The darkness began to fade, and new visions took their place. Michael saw hope. People helping one another, strangers embracing, communities rebuilding, hands reaching out instead of turning away. He saw kindness replacing hatred, forgiveness mending broken relationships, and faith returning to those who had once lost it. Where there had been division, there was now unity. Where there had been despair, there was light. This was the other path. The other choice. Jesus turned to Michael, his gaze filled with both love and urgency. "This is the choice before humanity." He paused, then placed a hand over Michael's heart. "You must tell them." A surge of warmth filled Michael's chest, an overwhelming sense of purpose, of responsibility. He knew now that his journey had not been just for him. He had been given a mission. A message for the world. A warning, and a choice. And as the visions faded, as the light around him grew brighter, one final thought echoed in his mind. Time is running out. The choice must be made. What will humanity choose? Will they continue down the path of destruction, or will they return to love, faith, and unity? The answer lies in each of us. Stay with us as we uncover more of Michael's extraordinary revelation. Michael stood in the radiant light, his heart torn between two realities. He longed to stay in this heavenly place, this realm of peace, love, and divine presence. Here, there was no pain, no fear, no sorrow. Only an overwhelming sense of belonging, as if he had finally found his true home. But deep inside, he knew. He could not stay. Jesus looked at him with infinite understanding. Michael hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Will they believe me?" he asked, doubt creeping into his heart. Jesus smiled gently, his eyes filled with both certainty and love. "Some will. Some will not. But your task is to speak the truth." Michael swallowed hard. He was just a boy, how could he possibly convince people of what he had seen? How could he make them understand the urgency of the message he had been given? As if sensing his thoughts, Jesus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Do not be afraid. You will not walk alone. My Spirit will guide you." The warmth from his touch radiated through Michael's entire being, filling him with a strength he had never known before. Then, the world around him began to shift. The golden light dimmed, the heavenly presence began to fade, and a powerful force pulled him backward. Michael's heart pounded. He wasn't ready, there was so much more he wanted to understand, so many questions he longed to ask. But the decision was not his to make. His time had come to return. The moment of return. A sudden rush of air filled his lungs. His body jerked violently, and a sharp gasp escaped his lips. He was back. Blinding fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled his nostrils. Voices, urgent, frantic, surrounded him. A sob. A familiar, trembling voice. Michael. His mother. He turned his head slightly, his vision still blurry, and saw her face, streaked with tears, filled with disbelief and overwhelming relief. Doctors and nurses stood frozen, their expressions shifting from shock to awe. "He's back," someone whispered. A nurse covered her mouth, eyes wide. One of the doctors pressed a hand to his forehead, as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. The heart monitor that had once been silent now beeped steadily, announcing what science had declared impossible. For nearly 10 minutes, Michael had been gone. No pulse. No breath. No signs of life. And yet, here he was. Alive. Awake. Returned with a mission. Michael tried to sit up, but his body was weak. His mother clutched his hand tightly, as if afraid to let go. His father, standing beside her, wiped his eyes, his usual strong demeanor shattered by emotion. His younger sister, too small to understand the full weight of what had happened, simply stared, her lips moving in a silent prayer of gratitude. Michael took a shaky breath, his mind still adjusting to the overwhelming reality. He had been to a place beyond this world. He had seen and heard things that no one on earth could imagine. And he had been given a message. A warning. A choice. But would they listen? Would they believe? His journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. What happens next? How will Michael share his message with the world? Stay with us as we uncover the next chapter of his incredible story. Michael's story spread faster than he could have ever imagined. At first, it was whispered among close friends and neighbors, a tale that stirred curiosity and wonder. Then, as more people heard his account, the news traveled beyond his small town, reaching churches, schools, and communities across the country. Some dismissed it outright, calling it a hallucination, a trick of the mind caused by his near-death experience. But others, they listened. They listened not just with their ears, but with their hearts. And for those who truly heard him, something began to change. The woman who found hope again. In a distant city, a grieving mother named Emily sat alone in her dimly lit living room, holding a photograph of her son. He had passed away in an accident 2 years ago, and ever since, she had struggled to believe in anything. She had stopped praying, stopped hoping, stopped living. Then, one evening, she came across an interview with Michael. His words were simple but filled with an undeniable truth. Love never dies. Hope is never truly lost. Even in our darkest moments, God is still there. For the first time in 2 years, Emily wept, not out of sorrow, but out of something else. A flicker of light pierced through the darkness that had consumed her for so long. That night, she knelt beside her bed, hesitating at first, then whispering a prayer she thought she had forgotten. And in that moment, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, peace. A man who chose life. Hundreds of miles away, a man named Daniel stood on the edge of a bridge, staring down at the river below. He had lost everything, his job, his family, his sense of purpose. The weight of his burdens had finally become too much to bear. Then, his phone vibrated in his pocket. An old friend had sent him a video, a clip of Michael sharing his experience. Daniel almost ignored it, but something made him press play. Michael's voice filled the silence. You are loved. Even when you feel unseen, unheard, forgotten, God sees you. Your life has a purpose, even if you can't see it yet. Daniel's breath hitched. His fingers loosened their grip on the cold steel railing. For the first time in a long time, he chose to believe. Instead of letting go, he stepped back. He made a call, reaching out for help. That night, he made the choice to live. A town rebuilt, a community restored. In a small coastal town recently devastated by a hurricane, the people were exhausted. The storm had taken everything, homes, businesses, and even lives. The once thriving community had been left in ruins, with no hope in sight. Then, someone played a recording of Michael's testimony during a gathering at the local church. The storms will come, but they do not last forever. What matters is not what we lose, but how we choose to rebuild. The words resonated deeply. A spark of hope reignited in the hearts of those who had felt abandoned. Neighbors who had barely spoken to one another before the disaster now worked side by side, clearing debris, sharing resources, rebuilding not just homes, but relationships. One by one, their faith returned. They were not alone. They never had been. Sarah's miracle. One of the most powerful testimonies came from a single mother named Sarah. She had been struggling to keep food on the table, working 2 jobs just to survive. Every day felt like a battle, and no matter how hard she fought, it never seemed to be enough. She had stopped believing in miracles a long time ago. Then, one night, she heard Michael's message on the radio. When you feel like you have nothing left, that is when God is closest to you. Keep going. Keep believing. Something inside her shifted. That night, for the first time in years, she knelt beside her bed and prayed, not for wealth, not for an easy way out, but simply for guidance. The next morning, her phone rang. A company she had applied to months ago, one she had completely given up on, was offering her a job. A full-time position, with better pay, benefits, and stability. With tears streaming down her face, Sarah whispered, "It was like God heard me for the first time." The ripple effect of truth. Michael never sought fame, nor did he claim to have all the answers. He simply told the truth. And that truth spread, touching hearts, healing wounds, and changing lives. Some rejected his words, but many embraced them. Some doubted, but many believed. And those who believed, they were never the same again. What will you choose to believe? Michael's message was not just for a select few, it was for everyone. For you. For me. For the world. Will you listen? Will you see the signs? Will you choose faith, love, and hope? Because the choice is still ours to make. Michael's story is not just about a near-death experience or visions of the future. It is more than a miraculous return to life. It is a message, a wake-up call for humanity. His journey beyond the physical realm was not meant to instill fear, but to remind us of what truly matters. The warnings he received were not set in stone, they were choices laid before us. And the most important truth he carried back was this: we still have the power to change. Love and unity can overcome any storm. In his visions, Michael saw cities destroyed by hurricanes, floods, and fire. But what struck him most was not the disasters themselves, it was how people responded. There were those who isolated themselves in anger, turning their backs on their neighbors, allowing bitterness to divide them. Their suffering only deepened. But then, there were those who chose love, who chose unity. Communities that stood together, neighbors who helped one another, families that forgave and healed, these were the people who rebuilt, not just their homes, but their hearts. Michael understood, it is not the storm that destroys us, it is how we choose to face it. The world will always face challenges, whether natural disasters, personal struggles, or global crises. But when people come together in love and unity, there is nothing they cannot rebuild. Faith is a source of strength. Michael witnessed something profound: those who held on to faith, even in their darkest moments, were the ones who endured. Faith was not just an abstract idea, it was a source of strength. The mother who had lost her son found peace through prayer. The man on the brink of ending his own life found hope through a message of love. The devastated town that turned to God in their brokenness found the will to rebuild. Faith does not erase pain, nor does it promise an easy path. But it gives strength to keep going. Michael realized, faith is not about seeing, it is about trusting. It is about knowing that even when everything seems lost, we are never truly alone. Small acts of kindness can change the world. In one of his final visions, Michael saw something beautiful: the power of a single act of kindness. A stranger offering food to someone in need. A father forgiving a son after years of silence. A child smiling at an elderly woman, making her feel seen. The ripples of these moments extended far beyond what the eye could see. Michael understood that great changes don't always come from grand gestures. Sometimes, it is the smallest act of love, the quietest moment of kindness, that alters the course of history. A word of encouragement. A helping hand. A decision to forgive. These are the choices that shape the future. The future is not set in stone. Michael had seen visions of destruction, of wars, natural disasters, and a world consumed by fear and hatred. But he also saw another possibility. A world where people remembered love. Where faith was restored. Where kindness triumphed over selfishness. The future he had witnessed was not a fixed destiny. It was a crossroads. A choice. The destruction he saw was not a punishment, it was a warning. A reminder that humanity still has the power to change its course. Jesus had told him, "The greatest danger is not from the storms or the fires. It is from the hearts that have turned away from love." Michael knew now, the future is in our hands. A final message to the world. When Michael woke up in that hospital bed, he carried more than just memories, he carried a mission. His experience was not meant to be hidden, nor was it for him alone. It was for all of us. Will we listen? Will we choose love over division? Faith over fear? Unity over hatred? The choice remains open. But time is running out. What will you choose? Michael's journey did not end when he returned to life, it had only just begun. With every breath he took, he carried a mission. A message. A warning. A choice. He spoke in churches, in town halls, on television, and through radio broadcasts. He told his story to anyone who would listen, not for attention, not for fame, but because he knew the truth was bigger than himself. Turn back, he urged. Turn back to love. To faith. To kindness. To unity. Some believed. Their hearts opened, their lives changed. They saw the signs and understood that the warnings were not meant to bring fear, but to awaken them. But others scoffed. They called it a dream, a hallucination. They dismissed him as just another person making bold claims in a world full of noise. They refused to listen. And yet, the signs kept coming. The warnings fulfilled. As Michael spoke, the world around him seemed to echo his words. Storms raged. Stronger than before, destroying places that had once been safe. Floods wiped out entire towns, leaving families stranded, searching for answers. Fires burned. Not just in forests, but in the hearts of people, anger, division, hatred spreading like an unstoppable wildfire. Conflicts grew. Nations rose against nations. Neighbors turned against each other. Families were divided, not just by physical distance, but by the inability to forgive. Everything he had seen in his vision was unfolding before his eyes. The warnings had not been empty threats, they were real. But so was hope. A choice still remains. Michael understood that it was not too late. The future had not yet been written. He had seen a world where people turned back to love, where families were reunited, where faith was restored. He had seen acts of kindness heal wounds deeper than war, deeper than any disaster. He had seen hearts change, and through that change, the world itself transformed. But the choice had to be made, and it had to be made soon. Jesus had told him, "The greatest danger is not from the storms or the fires. It is from the hearts that have turned away from love." Michael knew that if humanity refused to listen, if people continued down the path of selfishness, division, and hatred, then the destruction he had seen would not be a possibility, it would be an inevitability. But if they chose love, if they chose faith, if they chose kindness, then everything could change. The final question. Michael continues to share his message. He speaks not with fear, but with urgency. He knows that every person who listens has the power to shape the future. Some believe. Some do not. But as the storms rage, as the fires burn, as the conflicts grow, his words remain. A reminder. A choice. A warning. The question is no longer about Michael. The question is about us. Will we listen, before it's too late?